St. Joan of Arc Chapel is a Gothic 15th century chapel built around 1420 in Chasse-sur-Rhone, France, southeast of Lyon in the Rhone Valley. St. Joan of Arc's connection to the chapel has been debated over the years. Clues have provided speculation that St. Joan may have prayed in the chapel after meeting with King Charles VII on March 9, 1429. At that time, the chapel was dedicated to Saint Martin de Sessuel. The chapel is located in the heart of the Jesuit-run Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, amid a mix of eclectic building styles. It is easily the oldest structure in Milwaukee. This intimate place of worship served a small French community for over 400 years before falling into disrepair after the French Revolution. Originally, it only had space for about 1 or 2 rows of pews, enough for a family to worship, but we'll talk about the expansion later. Its fate turned in the 1920s when architect and historian Jacques Couel came upon the chapel. In his words, it was absolutely unique in its genre. He made drawings of it, measured the dimensions, took photos, and numbered its stones. A devotee of St. Joan of Arc, Gertrude Hill Gavin, learned of the chapel and decided to acquire it in 1926, having it dismantled in France and shipped to her Brookville estate within the town of Oyster Bay on Long Island in New York. Gertrude could afford to move a church. Her father was an American railroad magnate. In fact, she had earlier shipped a French Renaissance chateau to her estate. The chapel was renamed to St. Joan of Arc, and with the permission of Pope Pius XI, Mass was allowed to be said in the building. Just behind the exterior of the chapel is the Blessed Virgin Mary Grotto. Random niches dot the walls surrounding the Blessed Mother, which must make for an even more beautiful prayer space when filled with candles in the evening. In 1962, Gertrude sold the chateau and chapel to Mark and Lillian Rotman. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's Rotman. But 5 days before they were to move into the chateau, it caught fire during renovations, but the chapel escaped damage. The Rotmans, with no relationship to Marquette University, donated the chapel. It took 9 months for workers to disassemble the chapel, mark the stones for reassembly, and load the stones onto a fleet of semis bound for Milwaukee. Let's take a look inside. The stones were then reassembled on the campus, and in doing so, the tiny nave was expanded to allow for more attendance at Mass and for other functions. The pointed 2-dimensional arch past the nave is an immediate sign of the Gothic architecture, not only in design, but in how it supports the building. The chapel recently reopened after extensive renovations to the radiant heat flooring, the roof, and some more nuanced lighting. The Joan of Arc statue at the altar was given to the university and is actually a life-sized replica of Joan. She sure was tiny. Next to her is the Joan of Arc Stone. Gertrude purchased the Joan of Arc Stone. The stone is believed to be one upon which Joan prayed for success before battle and has a bit of mystery to it. Legends say Joan prayed to the Virgin Mary while standing on this stone. After finishing her prayer, Joan knelt down and kissed the stone. Ever since, the stone has remained colder than those around it. The stone is backed by an official French endorsement of authenticity, and it sits in a wall niche behind the altar. There's a stone door cemented to the sanctuary floor at the left of the altar. This is the tomb of Chevalier de Saturo. Hope I'm saying that one right too. He was a formal châtelain of Chasse. He was the son of the family who built the chapel and a national hero of France who died in battle. His remains remained in France when the chapel was moved. The crucifix from a bishop's crossier, or crossier, maybe, was gifted to the chapel and is displayed to the left of the altar. The vault ceiling, while beautiful, is an engineering solution as a self-supporting arched form to support the building. As the windows were destroyed years ago when the chapel was in France, Charles J. Connick was commissioned to design and create the stained glass windows to be done. Connick used the stained glass windows in St. John the Divine in New York City as a model for the colors of the windows. He had previously created those windows as well. He finished and installed them in the chapel in 1929. As I mentioned earlier, the chapel was in such disrepair, it had no altar and no windows. Gertrude therefore bought a 13th century Gothic altar, which makes the altar older than the chapel. Look at the precise carving of the columns supporting the altar. All of the grooves are spectacularly the same depth, curvature, and width. That's some feat for manual carving. This little Madonna and Child sculpture was a gift and is done in a Flemish style. Look at the close-up of the beautiful design on the ceiling above the nave. The carvings of Jesus, Peter, and Paul at the chapel door are not original to the chapel. They were rescued from another church which was destroyed in World War I. Jesus' arms and cross were destroyed. His body was all that remained. What a beautiful reuse of this sculpture. Despite the changes that have occurred outside the chapel walls over the past 600 years, St. Joan of Arc Chapel still serves the same purpose its builders intended, to be a place of worship and celebration. Quoting Marquette University, "It beats as the spiritual heart of the Catholic Jesuit community that surrounds it."